Didn't I tell you I was going golfing with my boss today? Geez, don't call me for stuff like that. When I frantically called my husband, the response I got was cold and distant. I had just received news that our daughter had been involved in a car accident. She was reportedly taken to the hospital, and despite the urgency, when I called my husband, who was out, he showed no signs of concern. I exclaimed, like, "What are you talking about? She's your daughter too." But his demeanor remained unchanged. "I don't care. Golfing with my boss is more important than she is." My name is Catherine. I'm a 42-year-old homemaker, living with my husband and daughter. My husband, Bob, who is 3 years older than me, works for a major company in downtown. We met at a party thrown by a mutual friend after I started my career. Back then, I found Bob, who was dedicated to his job as a businessperson, very attractive. When Bob asked me out, I was over the moon, and the day he proposed felt like I was on cloud 9. After getting married, I quit my job to focus on household chores and enjoyed a happy newlywed life. A year later, we were blessed with a daughter named Emily. Raising her wasn't easy, but my mother-in-law, who lost her husband and lived alone, was always there to help, which was a blessing. Now, Emily is in her sophomore year of high school. She studies hard, is active in school activities, and enjoys her life as a teenage girl, hanging out with friends and such. However, this year, there was a noticeable change in our previously harmonious family life. It started about 6 months ago. Right after a long weekend. Bob had planned a trip with his colleagues, so Emily and I spent the holiday just the two of us. On the last day of the holidays, Bob returned, so we were having dinner together as a family for the first time in a few days. At that time, Emily talked to Bob about her plans for after high school. While Bob was away, Emily had consulted with me about her future. She had already decided to go to college, and I had given her my blessing, so all that was left was to get Bob's opinion. "Hey, Dad. I've been thinking. I want to go to college after high school," Emily said, nervously approaching the topic. I knew that Bob had been saving money for Emily's future, so I never doubted that he would support her decision. However, contrary to my expectations, Bob grimaced and replied dismissively, "Why should I care? Do whatever you want." I was taken aback by his cold response and unintentionally let out a gasp. Bob immediately put down his fork, left the table without clearing his plate. As if he was in a bad mood, he stomped off to his room. Left behind, Emily and I were taken aback by Bob's unusually distant behavior. I wonder what got into Dad. Did I say something wrong? He's probably just tired from the trip. We'll discuss your plans another time. I tried to console her. Although Emily seemed uneasy, she accepted my explanation. However, the next day, Bob's cold attitude persisted. From that point on, Bob began to blatantly ignore Emily. He wouldn't talk to her at all and always acted indifferent. Moreover, he started going out more on weekends, and the time we spent together as a family decreased significantly. Given the atmosphere, discussing Emily's future became impossible. Feeling consistently ignored without understanding why, Emily began to resent her father. Even my attempts to mediate didn't help, and their relationship worsened. Concerned about the situation, I consulted with my mother-in-law, who had a good relationship with Bob. She even tried to scold him. However, that only made Bob angrier, leading him to snap, and he was like, "Mind your own business." To make matters worse, he even blamed me for discussing the issue with my mother-in-law. On the night my mother-in-law came over, after Emily locked herself in her room, Bob yelled at me. "Why did you talk to my mom? Don't meddle. It's because you've been cold to Emily, isn't it? Why are you ignoring her now? You used to dote on her so much." When I finally mustered the courage to ask why, Bob just glared at me with annoyance and didn't answer. No matter how hard I tried to mediate between the two of them, Bob's attitude didn't change at all. Time went by without knowing the reason for his change. But considering his sudden change in behavior after he returned from the long weekend trip, it's reasonable to think something happened during the trip. Maybe someone filled his head with nonsense. It might be all in my head, but I can't figure it out on my own. So, I decided to talk to my mother-in-law and investigate the reason for Bob's change. Then, one day. It was Sunday, but both Bob and Emily were out since the morning. As I was doing my usual housework at home, I received a call on the landline just before noon. It was an unknown number displayed on my phone. I picked up with suspicion, and to my surprise, the caller claimed to be from the police. "Are you related to Emily?" "Yes, I'm her mother." "Oh my God, did something happen to her?" With a sinking feeling, I asked the officer back, and the words I heard next were completely unexpected. The officer was like, "Actually, the bus Emily was on got into a traffic accident." I couldn't respond right away. I felt faint, and my hands holding the phone started shaking. Emily had told me she was going to the mall with friends, and apparently, she was on the bus at the time. According to the officer, a car from the opposite lane crashed into the bus, and Emily and her friend were taken to a city hospital. After hearing the details of the accident and hanging up, I was in shock and couldn't move for a while. But I knew I had to tell Bob quickly, so I rushed to call him on my cell. After more than 20 seconds of ringing, Bob answered. He grumbled like, "What is it?" Ignoring his tone, I frantically conveyed what happened to Emily. "Bob, this is serious. I just got a call from the police. The bus Emily was on got into an accident. She's apparently been taken to the hospital." As I explained, tears streamed down my face. But ignoring my panic, Bob coldly responded like, "So? What do you want me to do about it?" Seeing no signs of him being disturbed, and feeling as if he couldn't care less, I got even more frustrated. "What are you saying? Please head to the hospital now. I'm going too." Before I could tell him the name of the hospital, Bob cut me off. "Huh? Didn't I tell you I have a golf outing with my boss today? I'm staying overnight and coming back tomorrow morning. Can't help it." True, he had told me a few days ago about a golf outing with his boss today. However, I was shocked by Bob's lack of concern about our daughter's accident. "How can you even say that? Emily is your daughter." Bob was like, "I don't care. Golf with my boss is more important than her. You go to the hospital on your own." He spat out before hanging up abruptly. I tried calling back immediately, but it seemed he turned off his phone. I sent a text, but given his attitude, I doubted he would reply. Even though they had been distant, Emily is his flesh and blood. How could he be so heartless? This incident completely shattered my trust in Bob, and I was certain I couldn't continue living with him. I decided on divorce, but heading to the hospital was my top priority, so I hurriedly left home. As he had declared, Bob didn't come home that day. He had said it was too far from the golf course, so he planned to stay at a hotel alone after golf. He even took the next day off work. When Bob came home the next morning, he was surprisingly cheerful, which was hard to believe for a father whose daughter had an accident the previous day. "Hey, what happened to Emily? Is she hospitalized?" Though Bob asked about Emily's condition, his casual tone made it clear he wasn't genuinely concerned. I was in the living room. Then I looked up to the sky and replied, "She's there." Seeing my downcast expression, for some reason, Bob looked pleased. "I see. Well, that's a relief. Once Emily's funeral is over, we can get divorced right away." Saying that, he pulled out a piece of paper from his bag and thrust it in front of me. It was an invoice from a lawyer who assists divorce procedure. By the way, it also served as a contract for lawyer consultation, and it already had his signature on it. I thought he was quite prepared, but since I had already decided to divorce Bob, it might have saved me some hassle. "All right, I got it." I quietly agreed to the divorce. Bob didn't even discuss the reason for the divorce, he just walked away to his room without saying anything else, as if he was done with me. The Bob who once cherished Emily and valued our family was gone. It was a harsh realization. But I didn't feel sad, only an increasing resentment towards him. Then, I called my mother-in-law and told her Bob was back, and contacted the lawyer. Within an hour, my mother-in-law arrived at our house, and Bob returned to the living room. As soon as my mother-in-law saw Bob, she approached him with tears in her eyes. "Bob, what were you doing when your family needed you the most? I never thought you'd be this cold-hearted." Even when scolded by his mother, Bob didn't show any remorse. Instead, he was like, "I had prior commitments, what can I do?" And it was all her making a big fuss, looking at me with a mocking attitude. He continued like, "I've been dying to get divorced. With Emily gone, I feel so relieved. Now, I can leave without any regrets," speaking ill of not only me but also Emily. I couldn't stand it any longer. "Enough is enough," I shouted, thrusting a few pictures at Bob. The pictures showed a man and a woman closely together, looking intimate. The moment he saw the pictures, Bob's face turned pale. The man in the pictures was unmistakably Bob. Where did you get these pictures? Stammering, I told him calmly. They were taken yesterday afternoon. Weren't you supposed to be at a business golf outing? Instead, you were with a young woman. What were you up to? Confronted, Bob averted his eyes with a frustrated look. These pictures were taken less than an hour after I called about the Emily situation. Bob began to make excuses like she's just a colleague from work. We just went golfing together. I sighed in disbelief. Golfing in such fancy clothes? I don't think so. I already know you're cheating, so save your breath. The word cheating made Bob's face stiffen. His inability to deny it immediately was telling. But this wasn't the first time I learned of Bob's affair. Recently, he often left the house without telling where he was going. So, after discussing with my mother-in-law and getting some financial help, I had hired a private investigator. The investigation revealed that whenever he went out, he met the woman in the photos, exposing his affair. His so-called business golf was a complete lie, and he probably stayed at a hotel with his lover. I have more evidence of your affair. I even have a video of you and that woman coming out of a hotel. Don't think you can get out of it. When I said that, Bob looked pleadingly at his mother. But she already knew of his infidelity and firmly shook her head in disapproval. To cheat and not even visit Emily in the hospital, and then to selfishly rejoice thinking she's dead. I don't know how you'll face your father. My mother-in-law said this with a mix of anger and sorrow. Bob froze in shock, his mouth agape. Wait, isn't Emily dead? I explained to a bewildered Bob like don't jinx it. You misunderstood. She's very much alive. The injuries from the accident were just minor scratches. Emily was taken to the hospital yesterday, but she was fine and had no major injuries. The accident wasn't severe, so she came home the same day. Bob misunderstood my comment looking up to the sky she's there, and assumed Emily had passed away. Emily is on her school trip as planned. She'll be landing soon. A school trip? Bob was taken aback, his eyes wide. Bob, who didn't care about his daughter, had completely forgotten about Emily's school trip. The trip started today and was for 3 nights and 4 days. Emily had gone shopping for it yesterday. The doctor had said that there wouldn't be any issues with Emily going on the school trip, so she left as scheduled this morning. When I told Bob that Emily was up in the sky, she was probably boarding the plane. I used those words to indirectly blame him for not worrying about our daughter. Oh, that's what happened? Well, I'm glad Emily is okay. I hope she enjoys her trip. How can you say that now? You knew how much she'd been looking forward to this trip since sophomore year. But I guess you'd be just as happy if she had an accident. You probably forgot all about it. I sternly rebuked Bob, who tried to feign laughter. I didn't have a shred of affection left for him. No matter what he says in the future, I'm never gonna trust Bob again. Just then, an email notification popped up on Bob's smartphone. After reading the message, Bob's body began to tremble with anger. Shoving the screen in my face, he shouted like, "Hey! What the hell is this?" I looked at the screen with my mother-in-law. It was from Emily with a concise message. I can't consider someone who prioritizes his affair over his family as my father. I'm cutting ties with you. It was as if she was sending a message to a stranger. It seemed that Emily learned yesterday about Bob's lie about playing golf when he was actually meeting his mistress. She probably sent the email after landing. Being bluntly disowned by his 17-year-old daughter, Bob's face, which was pale just moments ago, turned a deep shade of red from shame and anger. He glared at me and began yelling. He was like, "This is all your fault. Weren't you the one who cheated first?" I was completely lost. What are you talking about? When did I ever cheat? Don't play dumb. Jessica told me. Jessica? Who's that? Then I remembered that the detective agency found out that the name of Bob's mistress was Jessica. According to Bob, Jessica had filled his head with baseless lies about me when they first started their affair. She told him that I had cheated on him and that Emily was fathered by someone else. The detective agency confirmed that he began his affair 6 months ago, right when the relationship between Bob and Emily started to sour. Since Jessica works at the same company as Bob, they likely started their affair during the long weekend. Jessica had been spreading outrageous lies, saying I had cheated in the past and had Bob raise Emily, a child fathered by another man. But Emily doesn't look or act anything like me. It's natural for me to have doubts. Both my mother-in-law and I were rendered speechless at Bob's outburst. Thinking Emily wasn't his because of Jessica's lie, he began to resent her and treated her coldly. But he didn't want to divorce because he didn't want to pay child support. However, mistaking Emily's accident for her death yesterday, he was relieved thinking he could divorce without any complications. You've got to be kidding me. So you believed a lie your mistress cooked up over your own family? No matter how angrily I shouted, Bob just responded with a dismissive laugh. I don't care whether it's true or not. I'm gonna divorce you and be with Jessica. Before I could retort, my mother-in-law stepped in. With a stoic face, she sighed deeply as she locked eyes with Bob. I realized she was livid. I wonder where I went wrong raising you. I'm so ashamed. Did you forget that Emily looked just like you when she was a baby? She's definitely your child. I told you I don't care about that anymore. No matter how much she scolded, Bob remained defiant. Right then, someone knocked at the front door. I went to answer and brought the guest to the living room. Bob looked puzzled. The visitor was a man in a suit, around our age. Bob rudely asked, like, who the hell are you? Are you her lover or something? Unfazed, the man handed Bob his business card with a smile. Bob accepted the business card with disbelief, but the next moment his eyes widened in surprise as he read. A lawyer? Yes, he was the lawyer I had hired with the help of my mother-in-law. I had consulted him about Bob around the same time I had the detective agency investigate. I had asked him to come over yesterday, anticipating that Bob would do something rash given the situation with Emily. I suspected it had to do with Emily, and I had a feeling Bob might have done something unthinkable. I told Bob, like, call your mistress over right now. Bob started panicking and was like, why would Jessica be involved? At this point, the lawyer chimed in like, it's quite unreasonable to say she's not involved. Call her now. Bob had no comeback to that. Realizing he had no way out, Bob begrudgingly contacted his mistress. About 30 minutes later, a young woman arrived at the house. Jessica looked like she was in her 20s and probably took a personal day off from work, just like Bob. She approached us with a disgruntled look. What's this all about? I've got nothing to do with your family issues. Despite Jessica's refusal, I told her that I was divorcing Bob and that even if she stayed with Bob, he'd have to pay child support to Emily, who was about to go to college. What? I have nothing to do with this. She insisted she had no involvement, but the lawyer promptly responded. We have plenty of evidence of the affair. Plus, you fed Bob some nasty lies which resulted in irreparable damage to Catherine and her family. That's defamation, and we could sue you for it. By the time the lawyer finished explaining, both Bob and Jessica had turned pale. Realizing they were out of options and not wanting a court battle, Bob agreed to pay child support properly. We went through a divorce. Later on, I heard that Bob's company found out he had been using his boss as a cover for his affairs. The whole company was appalled by the way he handled the situation, especially when they found out he pretended to be happy about his daughter's fake death. Exposing his true nature led him to resign from his position. Trying to find a new job proved difficult as word of Bob's misconduct had spread within the industry. Although he managed to find part-time jobs, his pride got in the way, and he constantly had issues with colleagues, which led him to quit frequently. The savings set aside for Emily's future had already been spent on his affair with Jessica. Soon after our divorce, the two broke up, and Jessica apparently quit her job too. But now, that's none of my concern. Struggling, Bob turned to his mother for help, but was denied. He even tried to cozy up to me and Emily. He was like, please, I was wrong. Let's start over, the three of us. Of course, we rejected him. We blocked his contacts and moved to a new place with the help of his mother. Now, his mother lives near us, and we continue to maintain a close relationship. I have no idea what became of Bob, and I never want to be involved with him again. Freed from the stress of the troubled relationship with his father, Emily has been thriving in high school. Now, as a senior, she got accepted into her first-choice college. Congratulations, Emily! You did an amazing job. Thanks, Mom. It's all because you and Grandma supported me. Emily responded, tears streaming down his face. Since the college is commutable from our home, We plan to live together as we always have. I managed to find a job shortly after becoming a single parent and now work full-time. We have enough savings to cover Emily's tuition. I'm hoping for a bright future as we move forward, living happily with our family.